Hello, my name is Gail, and I would like to tell you the story of a macabre place I worked a few years ago. I will try to explain to you my story and how I ended up in that place. I was raised by my grandmother. My mother accidentally got pregnant with me, and my father never took me out, so she met a new guy, and he didn't really like the fact that she had a child from another marriage and told her to choose between me or life with him, and she left me with my grandmother, her mother, and my grandmother with a lot of effort managed to raise me because my mother didn't help much and was very distant. For you to be aware, I had brothers that I only met when I was 16. That was very cruel. Even growing up without her, I really missed having a father and a mother. My grandmother wasn't the same, even more so when I had contact with friends who had beautiful families. It always broke my heart. And that's how I grew up, getting used to it with that and trying to lead a normal life. I went through school, and as soon as I left high school, my grandmother got sick and I had to look for a job to help her. I started looking, and soon I found a dishwasher service in a restaurant. I could help around the house. The job itself, it was difficult because the restaurant was busy and the dishes were colossal. I remember that I spent 2 months working there. A friend had found me a spot at a car wash in the area. There they paid better and the job was less demanding. I had commented to him that I couldn't stand washing mountains of dishes anymore. My grandmother was still sick, and soon her medical bill arrived. Her children joined in to pay, and I helped too, of course. Time passed and everything was going well until overnight the owner sold the car wash and I was left without a job. I was left without a floor. My grandmother could only really count on me at that moment, and that's when a colleague from my old job called me. He gave an indication of a fabric factory that he was hiring. I didn't take long and went to see that vacancy, and there really was a fabric and clothing factory. The building was large. It had 2 gigantic floors that the machinery for clothing was divided. I took a quick test and was approved to start. There the pay was better and that job would solve my life. I started with the buttons and put the buttons on the shirts and spent the whole day in front of the machine doing the same movement. It was very tiring, but I really needed that. Right in the first days, I noticed that the factory had a floor below were some boxes, and I asked one of my colleagues about that place and what happened there. My colleague named Arnold had already been working there for 7 years and said that downstairs was a deposit that they kept goods and junk too. He said that there were remains there about the old machinery and materials from the old factory. I asked him what factory was there, and he said it was a mannequin factory, and he said that those mannequins from that factory were very bizarre and that any day I could go down there and see for myself eyes. A couple of days later, the office was ending. It was already night, and Arnold called me to look at the bottom floor of the factory, and I was very curious and went there to see. He said that only the bosses could turn on the lights in that place, and they almost never did that. At the time I felt a butterflies in my stomach, and we then walked towards the stairs that gave access to that place. Getting there in the middle of the stairs, it was already starting to get dark, and Arnold was telling me the story of that place. I realized that he was trying to scare me. He said that there was a successful mannequin factory there for many years, but that a scandal was discovered in that place involving the owner of the factory. As soon as he finished talking, we arrived at that place. It was very dark and big too. Right away, I already felt a bad feeling, and Arnold followed and told the story of the place. He said that the owner was not very sure of the head, and together with the normal mannequins he made some very strange types of monsters. That's when he lit up a creature that looked like a human with a lot of legs and a face full of noses. That scared the hell out of me, and Arnold started laughing. He told me not to be afraid, they were just mannequins. I fell for his joke, and he then said that he knew the location of another very bizarre one and asked if I wanted to see it, and I said yes. We walked a little further, and the place was full of rows of shelves. That's when he lit up a mannequin that was a person with legs instead of arms and with several mouths on the face, in place of eyes and nose, a bizarre scene. Arnold then continued saying that the owner of the factory did not hit very well, and these bizarre mannequins was himself the one who made. And when he went to talk about the scandal that happened in that place, a very strange thing happened. We started to hear noises like, if they were steps, they were more like the steps of mannequins. That sound was very bizarre, and Arnold said Oh no, I hate it when that happens. And he started running and pulled my arm. We ran towards the stairs, and there was a terrible feeling of death that began to haunt us. When we reached the lighted part of the stairs, I still continued to hear that sound downstairs, and I asked Arnold what the hell was that. He replied that that place was haunted, that no guards stayed more than a week working there, and that the owners of the place offered a great payment for whoever managed to guard there. I asked what was that thing that chased us, and he said that the former owner and the scandal was the owner killing people to make mannequins. His own employees started to disappear. Some were missing for years, and he made macabre mannequins with them, in the style of those he had shown me. He said that people discovered this, the families of the victims even years later, and they went after revenge and killed the owner of the factory with their own hands. I left with this macabre story in my head and thinking of never going back there inside that place, until my uncles and my mother left my grandmother in the lurch, and with what I earned it was not enough to pay her medical costs. I was lost without knowing what to do. I couldn't let my grandmother die. I remembered that watchman vacancy and asked Arnold to tell my superiors at work that I would take that vacancy. On the same day, the staff responded and gave me the instructions to start. I would be the watchman for the whole building itself, and the only watchman too. My shift would start at night time, and the pay was arranged weekly. Right on the first night, when I was alone in that dark place facing the cameras, I thought that the work wasn't so bad compared to the repetitive movements of the factory during the day, but it didn't take long for me to realize the reason for not stopping any guard in that place. In one of the cameras that took the stairs to the bottom floor, I saw a mannequin leaving. He walked alone and slowly. I was very scared and didn't know what to do. Would I go there? Would you stay here? It didn't take long. I saw more mannequins leaving that place, so I decided to lock the door of the room I was in and close the window too. What was that? Mannequins walking alone? On the cameras, they spread out around the factory and kept walking. They stood still. That scene was also quite bizarre. I don't think they knew I was there, and it was like that the whole night. I was watching that strange and supernatural scene. Even when I locked it, I held my bar and passed through the first night. Before dawn, I saw them going back into the dark one by one. The next night it was the same thing. This time I saw those bizarre creatures and others leaving too. It was very strange to see that through the cameras. There was one that only had arms, and it was very scary. One that had several heads and several other sinister creatures. And the behavior was the same. They leave that dark place and return with daylight, and then the work shift begins. I found it curious because they didn't break anything or leave any traces. I thought I could deal with that and spent the rest of the week locked in my room watching those strange creatures. When I received the first payment, I saw the enormous difference that enduring that would make in my life. But I wish it had gone the way I thought. On Wednesday of the second week of work, I noticed a difference in the movements of the mannequins. They made a kind of line, and from the darkness of the floor below a man came out. He looked like alive. The mannequins worshipped him. He had a hunchback, and I couldn't see his features very well from the camera, until he started looking at the camera and pointed to my room. It was the point that the mannequins started running towards me. There must have been more than 50 of them there. I ran and put a desk that I had in a corner in the door, and I put the closet in the window, and they soon started hitting the door and in the closet by the window. What a panic I went through. I thought I was going to die. They kept trying to get into the building until dawn, when they all ran into the dark at the same time. At that moment, I decided to ask for the bills. I couldn't lose my life, and I also didn't want to work at the factory anymore. Luckily, my grandmother got better, and today I work in a fast food, and I'm studying law. A while later, talking to Arnold, I told him what happened to me, and he said I was lucky to stay alive. He sent me a photo of the former owner of the factory and one of his live models. That terrified me. The man was the same hunchback I had visa, and the mannequin was a woman without legs and arms, just the torso with her lips and eyes sewn shut. A horrible thing that I will never forget. What happened and what happens there, I don't think I'll ever know, and nowadays I just want to forget about it all.